good morning to our West Coast listeners. My name is Juan Thomas, and I have the honor of serving as chair of the ABA Civil Rights and Social Justice section. Welcome to our weekly chair chat. I hope all of you voted yesterday or during early voting if your state and locale allowed you to do so. And because yesterday was our election, I am so honored to have Bill Kresse, who is one of the commissioners of the Chicago Board of Elections, as my guest today. Bill is not only a commissioner to the Chicago Board of Elections, he's also a professor at Governor State University here in Illinois. And he's also an active member of the American Bar Association's State and Local Government Section Council, which I was also a member of, and also active member of our Civil Rights and Social Justice section. So we're very happy to have Bill with us today. And Bill, welcome to our chair chat.
Thank you, Juan. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here on Chair Chat, where you've had some very outstanding members of the bar sitting here with you virtually to chat. And so I am honored, though I feel I'm bringing it down a little bit, but we'll see what we can do.
Oh, not at all. You are keeping the bar high. And so, Bill, thank you for being with us today. So yesterday, as you well know, was Election Day in America. And I just kind of want to just throw out for you to just kind of respond and kind of react to your thoughts and observations about yesterday's election, not just in the Chicago area, but if you could speak more broadly of your observations around the country. How did things go with respect to election irregularities, voting issues? Are there any pending issues that you think are going to be a challenge moving forward? Or just overall, what did you think of yesterday's election?
Frankly, I'm very pleased. Here in the city of Chicago, we did quite well, despite changes that, in every election, there are going to be some changes. In Chicago, due to a change in state law, we reduced the number of precincts in the city of Chicago from 2,064 precincts just in the city of Chicago. That's been reduced now to a little bit over 1,000. So we had on election day, we had just under 1,000 polling places, precinct level polling places, plus 51 what we're calling vote centers spread across the city, where voters from anywhere in the city could vote at any one of those 51 locations. So essentially, every voter, for the first time, well, we did this in the primary in June, could vote at any one of 52 locations if they chose to vote on election day. Additionally, in Illinois, we have what's been called no excuse vote by mail, where you don't need a note from your doctor in order to get an absentee ballot or what have you. Additionally, we had early voting sites open throughout the city for a number of weeks. So, and about half of our ballots come in that way. We're still waiting for the final numbers. In Illinois, as long as a vote by mail was postmarked by yesterday, we will accept it for another 2 weeks. So we will be accepting vote by mail ballots for 2 weeks from yesterday. And by the way, this is something I like to point out. When we say postmark, a lot of our mail is no longer received sort of the rubber stamp postmark you'd get at the desk. Instead, if you look carefully at the bottom of an envelope, there's an almost invisible barcode that the U.S. Postal Service prints on every piece of mail coming through. And it's one of the first things that they do when you process a piece of mail. Well, that barcode includes the date it was processed. So we view that as a type of postmark. We have the equipment at the Chicago Board of Election Commissioners to read that. So for the next 2 weeks, as vote by mail ballots come in, they are processed through a machine that reads that barcode. And if the date on it is election day or earlier, it gets counted. If it's or at least gets processed further. If it's after Election Day, then no, we cannot process ballots if they're postmarked after Election Day. But all in all, in Chicago, it went well. We had a little issue because of the equipment that we use in the precincts, where a person gets a paper ballot. And with our equipment, we use Sharpie pens to mark the ballot. And that's kind of controversial because I'm going to lean over here. If you bear down on these pens, they have a felt tip on them. I'll put it against my shirt so you can see it there. The ink can bleed through. Now we need that type of ink, because if we use a ballpoint pen on the ballots, they can, as you know from using ballpoint pens, you can get little globs of ink on the paper. Well, that can foul up, to use a technical term, our vote scanners. And so we don't like to use that because we don't want to, foul up our machinery, our election equipment. But what we do is here's an old ballot from Chicago, and for those around the country, just to give you an idea what voting in Chicago is like. This is from the 2020 election. So here's, I'll do this way. Here is side 1, and here is side 2. But we're not done yet. There's second
more
page there. Wait, there's more. Okay, here's side 3 and side 4. Okay, you can't see them real clearly on that, but we make sure that, when you mark the ballot, you are to fill in a small oval next to the candidate's name.
Right.
Well, we make sure that oval on this side does not align with the ovals on this side, so that even if ink bleeds through, unless it bleeds through onto that oval, it's not going to spoil your ballot. Right. So that's really not a big problem. People see the ink bleeding through, they think there's going to be a problem. Sometimes the machine doesn't accept it because when they flipped it over, they did a stray mark. Well, that will cause a problem with the readers, but generally it's not a problem at all.
But let me ask you this, Bill.
Yeah.
Given your concern about needing, maybe different kind of ink or things around kind of the internal processes, one question I wanted to ask you, in light of or in response to an economic justice concern, as you may know, the focus of our section this year is economic justice and trying to discuss economic parity and financial issues. Do you believe that our election systems need more financial resources to improve systems throughout not only Illinois, but perhaps around the country?
Oh, definitely. And, what I like to do is bring people into the Chicago board and show them all that we do. Right. For a couple of reasons. During the ABA annual meeting in Chicago in August, we brought a lot of folks by. We had 2 different tours of our facility showing all that we do. Also to show the security that we do. How we keep every ballot, we have chain of custody of the collection of the ballots, how we process everything, how we compare signatures on vote by mail ballots, all of this. But you see what a large operation it is. We have 1.5 million voters in the city of Chicago alone. So one, it's that. 2, we're trying to keep up with the latest technology. That costs a lot. We try to have redundancies in our system. That costs. We always on the watch for cybersecurity. Now, while our ballot information is not ever touch the internet, we have we call that air gap. But we have some, we have our own website that tells people where to vote and things like that. People can register online. We have to make sure that cyber connection is secure. And in just, the equipment and the redundancies, the fail-safe methods, so that if a scanner goes down, we have the ability to use a backup drop box or ballot box at every location.
Right.
So yes, and if we want to make, hopefully we do, want to make elections, fair, free, open, and accessible to all people, including the disabled community. A lot of
Right.
our polling places are in locations that we rent just for the day. Well, we can't control that. So we have a department that works all year just finding locations for polling places. So accessibility, and then vote by mail, making that available and secure. Early voting, making that available, secure. It takes a lot of money.
Right.
Example: yesterday in Maricopa County, and this has gotten some news out there. Maricopa is an interesting place to study on elections. They have Maricopa County is huge, both geographically and in population. They have about 4.5 million people now in Maricopa County.
Wow.
They conduct their elections on election day using 223, I think was the number, voting centers, which in Chicago, we have a site, an early voting site we call our super site in downtown Chicago, where we have 75 ballot box or ballot voting booths. That's the term I'm looking for. Voting booths, where voters can go. Wherever they're located in the city, we can prepare an electronic version of their ballot with the candidates for where they're located. It prints out a paper ballot that they can inspect, bring it in, and scan it. Essentially, that's what they have at 223 locations in Maricopa. But due to a little mechanical glitch at a couple of the locations, the scanners, and they have 2 or 3 or 4 of these scanners at every location, a few of them were not accepting the ballots. It turns out it was a printer ink problem because they print a date on the ballot when it gets fed in. And that, frankly, is an anti-fraud measure to make sure that somebody doesn't come along later and try stuffing the ballot box.
Right.
But they still had backup machines, and they still had the fail-safe, which is you deposit into a locked ballot box, it'll be processed later. But there was a lot of controversy over that. But if you have the resources, you could have backup machines available at every location. You can open up maybe a few more than that. You can hire the personnel that you require. We have to hire, even with the reduction in precincts and polling places in Chicago, we still have to hire between 6,000 and 6,500 people to work just on election day. And we have to pay them,
Right.
So it's resources are tough, and we do well around the country. There are locations that can't keep up with the technology, and this technology is good in so many ways. One, again, being a professor who teaches fraud examination, a lot of the technology is really good in securing the vote, making sure there is no fraud, or at least putting in the countermeasures, the controls, and the deterrence to keep that from occurring. And they make it accessible for so many other people. We have equipment in every one of our polling places now in Chicago, where if somebody comes in and say they're blind, they can put on a set of headsets and have a controller where they are talked through the voting.
Right.
Language accessibility. Every one of our locations has one of these touchscreen machines with the ballot in 12 different languages that are used throughout Chicago. So
good.
the money is important, and this is what will make voting easier, voting more secure, and then again, the economic justice that comes from that.
Right. That's a great point. Thank you for sharing that. So, Bill, what ways can lawyers specifically work, not just to help do election protection work, during the election season, But what's the role of lawyers to helping to ensure that our voting system and our election processes are strong and have integrity, that people can trust the process?
Right.
What ways can lawyers be involved, particularly from your perspective as someone who works in this space?
Right. Sadly, a lot of Americans do not have faith in our elections. A survey last year showed that something like 41% of Americans don't have confidence in the reported election results. So hopefully that's getting better. I did a survey. It showed that if elections were regularly audited, especially by independent CPAs, 67% said their confidence would increase. 40% said that they would vote more frequently. And I think this is one of the keys. We have a really good election system out there, and it gets degraded and denigrated a lot.
Right. Right.
What I would love to see is what we did in Chicago in August, what we did in Portland,
September.
Yeah, in September. If you're listening and if you're involved with your local bar association, put together a tour of your local election authorities' offices and facilities. Get a walkthrough and see all that we do to ensure that the ballots are secured, that we have that chain of custody recorded, and then go out and, as I like to say, be an evangelist and tell people, despite what all the lawyer jokes out there, people respect lawyers. I mean, let's face it. Who do they call for when they're in need of a problem? And tell them, no. I've been through that, through the authorities' offices, the election authorities' offices, and they're on top of it. They, and if there's anything they need, it's more funding to get more equipment, to get the latest technology. And because this is in get the word out there and hopefully get people more confident in elections. If we lose confidence in our elections, the democracy is in trouble.
Yes.
Because that is the key, the keystone of a democracy is faith in your elections. So again, work the polls on election day. The ABA has the wonderful Poll Watcher Esquire program. Volunteer, push in your state so that lawyers working on election day get continuing legal education credit for doing that.
Yes.
Because I'll tell you, you learn a lot when you work the polls. And but then take a tour, understand the way the system works. On our tour in August, we had elected officials come along who had no idea this is how we conduct our elections, and that's how they got their jobs. So so bring them along and learn the process, and then go out and tell people how wonderful a process this is, how secure it is, and where we need to go to move it in to as we go further into the 21st century.
We had several lawyers doing the poll watching work, but also doing the protecting democracy work through our election protection program through our section. So we would definitely want to applaud all lawyers who were involved in yesterday's election. You mentioned the tour that we took in Portland, and particularly how Oregon has, mail-in balloting. As I mentioned to you offline, my parents voted by mail-in ballot for the first time ever, mail-in first time ever, this past cycle. Could you speak to the integrity of the mail-in balloting process? Do you think that's a process that is the wave of the future? Do you see that as something that more states are going to adopt, like Oregon? And just could you kind of share your thoughts around that?
Right. I think it's, again, a lot has to do with the advances in technology on this. It seems to be a wave of the future. I think more states should adopt it. It makes it easier. I don't think we're ever going to get away from in-person voting on election day. And I think that's fine as well. A lot of people want to do it and they get civic pride in doing it. That's fine.
Right.
But I think for so many people, they need to have that option. And and you're never really sure, when you're going to be sick on election day 2 weeks in advance. So,
Right.
so to have that option now is good. When we get the ballot in, and this is again where the funding comes from, fortunately, we in Chicago have it. We have two very big machines for processing the mail-in ballots. And it's a fascinating technology. We load up the envelopes, and on the outside of the envelope, you sign your name, and there's a barcode on the envelope for that particular voter. And it goes into the machine, it reads the barcode, it takes a photograph of your signature on the envelope. It automatically looks up your signature from your voter registration file, and then a team of judges will observe the two signatures. And by comparing signatures, and here in Chicago, we train our judges on signature recognition, signature identification. Plus, we have our own, on-staff signature expert, and and this is done at a high speed. In the 2020 election, because of the pandemic, we had 5 pods of signature judges looking at big screen TVs, comparing these signatures, determining which envelopes could go on and be processed and which should be rejected. Right. In which case, we can then contact that voter by email, by text, by phone, by mail, to tell them there's a problem with your ballot. You can come in and cure it if you so choose. Right. And so the process is there. It doesn't have to all be done by hand. We can do it electronically or in this highly technical manner. The Postal Service, despite what you hear, they do a phenomenal job. Additionally, just about every jurisdiction that has a vote by mail also has drop boxes. Chicago, we had them inside each of our 51 vote by mail location. We had one outside box right in front of our headquarters building, which is protected 24/7 by armed guards. So it's also, has a video monitor and the whole thing. So there was no shenanigans going on there. I think it really is the wave of the future. And we election judges, or election authorities, try to think out every contingency that could take place. And if we hear of something going on, we immediately respond to it and secure it. So we're out to make sure, me and my colleagues around the country are out to make sure, again, that our elections are fair, free, open, and accessible to as many people as we possibly can.
That's a very important point. Thank you for saying that and sharing that with our listening audience. Now, Bill, I wanted to ask you, so people understand how you got to be in your position. You are one of 3 commissioners, correct?
That is correct.
And you are the sole Republican commissioner of the 3. Is that correct?
Right. Different.
So how are you selected?
How was I selected? Okay, well, different places have different ways. In most jurisdictions, elections are run by, say, a county clerk, something like that, or something equivalent. Here in Chicago, by state law, elections of the city of Chicago are run by the Chicago Board of Election Commissioners. We are not part of the city government. We're independent. And the 3 commissioners are elected one every 3 years. We have 3-year terms. We're elected by the 250, I think, judges of the Circuit Court of Cook County, Circuit Court of Cook County being the largest single court system in the country. And so I was elected by them. Now, moving on up there, my own background, I worked as a CPA auditor for a while, and then went to law school, clerked for a federal judge here in town, worked at big law firms, went back, got a couple more degrees, became a professor where I specialize in fraud examination. But I was working for the Chicago Board as a hearing officer for hearings that we have on petition challenges and such. So I had a history with the Chicago Board. And so I was, when there was an opening for the judge under state law, no more than 2 judges can be of the same political party. So the 2 Democrats and 1 Republican. I was encouraged to put my name into the hat, and I was interviewed by the chief judge and some others. And out of the candidates, they went with me. And as I say, I am really the sole Republican official in the city of Chicago. So it's kind of lonely at my lunch table in City Hall, but not really.
You don't live in a red county?
But I get along well with all my colleagues at the board, and I think they appreciate the background that I bring to the job. And again, we're all committed to the same thing, and that's making sure that the elections are fair, free, and open, because at the end of the day, it's about the process, not the outcome.
Right.
And it's a funny thing about democracy. Sometimes the other guy wins. And
Right.
I think we have to, in the words of Abraham Lincoln, we're friends, not enemies. So let's keep that in mind as well as we go forward. But yeah, that's how I got the job. Most places it's an elected official. The whole state of Illinois, unlike most states, the election authority in most states is the Secretary of State.
Right.
Illinois, it's not. It's an independent state board of elections, which is bipartisan as well.
Right. Bill, you have been a wonderful guest. I love your line. It's about the outcome. I'm sorry, it's about the process, not the outcome.
Yeah.
I think it's encouraging to hear an election official such as yourself, who happens to be a registered Republican, say that without being too partisan. I think democracy won yesterday. It looks like we had a good, fair, and open election throughout the country.
Yeah.
And I think the results represent the fact that a lot of people came out to vote, spoke their voice, and hopefully moving forward, we will have a strong and secure democracy where people like you will be able to continue to conduct fair, open, and honest elections. So thank you for your service to Chicago. Thank you for your service to the broader legal community, and for being a voice of transparency, accountability, and integrity.
Thank you for your kind words, Juan. I very much appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you all for joining us today. And again, we want to thank Bill Kresse for being our guest, commissioner, one of the commissioners to the Chicago Board of Elections. Have a wonderful afternoon and look forward to seeing you next week.